A warning to our viewers. The information presented in this report is based on insider reports and exclusive theories circulating within the Little People, Big World community. The details are shocking and the implications are devastating. What you are about to hear is a story that has been pieced together from sources who wish to remain anonymous. A story of betrayal so profound it threatens to shatter the very foundation of the Roloff family. We are told that the battle for Roloff Farms was never just about property or legacy. It was about life and death. For months, a dark secret has been festering behind the picturesque facade of the farm, a secret captured on a series of hidden audio recordings. These tapes, which we have come to call the Amy tapes, allegedly expose a cold-blooded plot by Caryn Chandler to not just inherit Matt Roloff's empire, but to, in the words of one source, drive Matt to the grave to get it. Before we dive into the chilling details of this exclusive report, a story you will not hear anywhere else, please take a moment to show your support for this channel. Hit that like button, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the notification bell. We are committed to bringing you the stories that go beyond the camera crews and the carefully edited episodes. You will not want to miss a single second of what's coming next because the truth is about to be revealed, and it is more terrifying than anyone could have possibly imagined. It all began with a feeling. A deep, gnawing suspicion in the pit of Amy Roloff's stomach that she couldn't shake. To the outside world, her public friction with Caryn Chandler was seen as the predictable jealousy of an ex-wife. It was cast as bitterness over Caryn's seamless transition from farm manager to the new matriarch of the farm. But according to our sources, what Amy was feeling was something far more primal, far more terrifying than simple jealousy. It was a protective instinct, a mother's fear, not for herself, but for the father of her children. She watched Matt, a man she had known for decades, a man whose every strength and vulnerability she was intimately familiar with, slowly but surely fall deeper under Caryn's spell. And with every passing month, the vibrant, bull-headed, and fiercely independent Matt Roloff she knew seemed to be fading, replaced by a man who was increasingly isolated, dependent, and frail. Caryn, on the surface, was the perfect partner. She was attentive, organized, and seemingly devoted to Matt's every need. She managed his appointments, oversaw his medications, and positioned herself as the indispensable caregiver, the only one who truly understood the complexities of his health. But Amy saw through the performance. She saw the subtle ways Caryn would steer conversations away from the children, the way she would gently dismiss Matt's ideas as too stressful for him right now, the way she took over communications and financial discussions, effectively building a wall around him, a wall built of concern and doting care, but a wall nonetheless. Amy saw a pattern of control, a slow, methodical consolidation of power. She confided in a close friend, reportedly saying, "It's like she's wrapping him in cotton wool, but I'm afraid she's really trying to suffocate him." The breaking point, the moment that turned suspicion into a desperate need for action, came during a discussion about the finalization of the farm's trust and estate planning. An insider claims that Amy overheard a fragment of a conversation where Caryn was telling Matt that for his own peace of mind and to reduce his stress, it would be so much simpler if everything was put under her name to manage on his behalf. She framed it as an act of love, a way to lift the burden from his shoulders. Matt, already weakened by health struggles and utterly convinced of Caryn's devotion, was reportedly agreeing. Amy was horrified. She knew Matt's stubborn pride. For him to even consider signing away control of his life's work was a red flag of monumental proportions. She knew then that she was witnessing not a partnership, but a conquest. But what could she do? Her words were poison to Matt. Any accusation she made would be immediately dismissed as the ramblings of a bitter ex. Zach and Jeremy, while frustrated with the farm negotiations, were still largely in the dark about the true nature of the situation. They saw a business dispute. Amy feared a life or death struggle. She needed proof, irrefutable, undeniable proof that could cut through Matt's infatuation and force him to see the truth. She needed to hear what Caryn was saying when she thought no one was listening. And that is when the idea, a desperate and morally complex gamble, was born. The plan was worthy of a spy novel, a modern-day Trojan horse designed to breach the fortress Caryn had built around Matt. Amy knew she couldn't just plant a bug in Matt's office. It was too risky, too overt. She needed a vessel, something personal and seemingly innocent that would be welcomed into the heart of their private world. The answer came to her late one night while browsing online. A high-end Wi-Fi-enabled digital photo frame. It was the perfect gift. It was thoughtful, a gesture of peace even. She could load it with pictures of the grandkids, a bridge between the fractured parts of their family. Matt, a man who loved both technology and his family, would adore it. And most importantly, he would place it exactly where she needed it, on his office desk. That desk was the nerve center of the farm. It was where Matt took his calls, where he signed his documents, and, as Amy had observed, it was where Caryn felt most comfortable and in command, often making her private personal phone calls while Matt was resting or out on the farm. According to our sources, Amy reached out to a trusted family friend, someone with a background in private security and technology. She explained the situation, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. She needed the photo frame to be more than it appeared. It needed a state-of-the-art, voice-activated audio recorder embedded within its casing, one with a long battery life and the ability to store weeks of audio. The device had to be completely undetectable. It was a massive risk. If discovered, it would not only destroy any remaining civility with Matt, but could potentially have legal ramifications. But for Amy, the risk of doing nothing was far greater. The custom device was prepared and delivered to her in a plain box. The day she gave it to him was a masterclass in understated performance. She presented it to Matt as an early birthday gift during a brief, prearranged visit to the farm. "I just thought with everything going on, it would be nice for you to have some happy memories right here on your desk," she said, her voice carefully measured. Caryn was there, observing with a watchful eye. Matt was genuinely touched by the gesture. He saw it as a sign that Amy was perhaps finally moving on, accepting his new life. He unwrapped it with enthusiasm, marveling at the crisp display as photos of Jackson, Lila, Ember, and Bode cycled across the screen. "This is great, Amy. Really thoughtful," he said, and with Caryn's smiling approval, he placed the photo frame on the corner of his office desk in the exact spot Amy had envisioned. The trap was set. The Trojan horse was inside the gates. As Amy drove away from the farm that day, she felt a profound sickness in her stomach. She had no idea what she would find, but she knew with every fiber of her being that the silence from that little black frame would soon be broken, and the truth it revealed would change everything. For weeks, an agonizing silence followed. The digital photo frame sat on Matt's desk, cycling through happy images of his grandchildren, a silent witness to the daily dramas of Roloff Farms. For Amy, every day was a torment of anxiety and self-doubt. She would wake up in the middle of the night, her heart pounding. What if she was wrong? What if she had committed this profound invasion of privacy, only to discover that Caryn was exactly who she appeared to be? The guilt of her deception was a heavy weight, but it was overshadowed by an even greater fear. What if she was right? What horrors would be waiting for her on that hidden memory card? During this time, reports from insiders painted a grim picture. Matt's health was a constant topic of concern. He had a series of minor setbacks, small ailments that, on their own, were not alarming, but together they seemed to be chipping away at his energy and his spirit. Caryn, meanwhile, was ever present, her role as caregiver becoming more and more pronounced. She was the gatekeeper to Matt. Friends of the family noted that it was becoming increasingly difficult to get Matt on the phone directly. Calls were often routed through Caryn, who would politely explain that Matt's resting or he's not up for a long chat today. She was managing his diet, his schedule, his social interactions, all under the guise of protecting his fragile health. The children, particularly Zach and Jeremy, were growing more distant, their frustration over the farm sale creating a chasm between them and their father. They saw Caryn as an obstacle in their business dealings, a frustrating influence on their dad's decisions. They had no idea that their mother believed the stakes were infinitely higher. Amy could only watch from afar, her heart breaking for her children and for the man she once loved, a man she now believed was in terrible danger. The photo frame on his desk was her only hope, a silent sentinel waiting to capture the truth. After nearly a month had passed, Amy knew she had to retrieve the device. She couldn't bear the suspense any longer. She concocted a simple, plausible excuse. She needed to take the frame back to update the photos with some new ones from the kids' birthdays. It was a perfect reason, one that no one would question. She called Matt, her voice bright and casual, and he readily agreed. The exchange was brief and nerve-wracking. When she arrived, Caryn greeted her at the door, her smile as pleasant and unwavering as ever. "He just loved the frame, Amy," Caryn said, leading her to the office. "He looks at it all the time." The irony was a bitter pill for Amy to swallow. She quickly and efficiently unplugged the frame, placed it in its original box, and left, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the package that held so many potential secrets. Back in the safety and privacy of her own home, she sat at her kitchen table, the box in front of her like a Pandora's box of her own making. With the special cable and software provided by her tech-savvy friend, she connected the frame to her laptop. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the device driver installed and a folder appeared on her screen. It was filled with dozens of audio files, each one time-stamped, created every time the voice activation threshold was met. She put on a pair of headphones, took a deep breath, and clicked on the first file. The initial recordings were mundane, the rustling of papers, Matt's voice on a business call, the low murmur of the television. Then she found what she was looking for. Caryn's voice, clear as a bell, speaking on the phone. She was talking to a friend, someone she was clearly very comfortable with. Amy's blood ran cold as she listened. The mask was off. The sweet, doting caregiver was gone, replaced by a voice dripping with contempt and exhaustion. "Oh my God, Brenda, you have no idea," Caryn's voice said, laced with a sigh. "Some days I feel like I'm running a nursing home for one. I have to remind him to take his pills. I have to make sure he doesn't overdo it. It's exhausting. I swear the things I do for this farm." Amy's stomach churned. She clicked to another file a few days later. It was Caryn and Brenda again. This time, they were laughing. "He tried to use the new ride-on mower by himself yesterday," Caryn said, a giggle in her voice. "Got it stuck in the mud by the pumpkin patch. I had to go out there and practically rescue him. He looked like a child who had dropped his ice cream. It's almost pathetic how much he depends on me now. He can't even make a decision about lunch without asking my opinion. But, her voice lowered conspiratorially, it makes things easier. Much, much easier to manage." Amy felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just frustration, this was mockery. Caryn was laughing at Matt's decline, at his growing dependence, seeing it not as a tragedy, but as a convenience. It confirmed Amy's worst fears about Caryn's emotional detachment. But the recordings were about to take a much darker turn. She found a file from late one evening when Matt was presumably asleep. Caryn was on the phone again, but this time her tone was not mocking. It was cold and clinical. She was discussing finances. "The final power of attorney papers are ready," Caryn said. "His lawyer looked them over, but my guy made a few suggestions, better protections. We're moving the last of the primary farm assets into the new trust structure next week. He thinks it's to simplify the estate for the kids, but really, it consolidates control. He's getting so forgetful lately, Brenda. It's really for the best that I handle all of this. He's just not capable of managing these complexities anymore." Amy's hands flew to her mouth. This was it. This was the financial coup she had suspected. Caryn wasn't just his partner. She was systematically stripping him of his power, using his trust and his failing health as the weapons. Every document signed, every asset moved, was another bar in the cage she was building around him. Amy scrolled through the files, her hands shaking so badly she could barely control the mouse. She had heard the contempt. She had heard the financial plotting. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for what she was about to hear next. It was the most recent recording from just 2 nights before she retrieved the frame. Caryn was in the office alone, the acoustics of the recording suggesting the house was quiet. She was on the phone with Brenda again, her voice low and triumphant. "It's done," Caryn said, a strange sense of finality in her tone. "He signed the last of the trust directives this afternoon. Everything is in place. My lawyer said it's ironclad. The farm, it's secure." There was a pause, and Amy could hear the faint sound of the friend, Brenda, on the other end of the line. She was asking a question. Then Caryn's voice returned, clear and sharp. "What happens next? You mean with him?" Caryn asked. There was another pause, a long, chilling silence that seemed to stretch for an eternity. Amy could hear Caryn take a slow, deliberate breath, a sound that would be seared into her memory forever. And then came the words that exposed the true, monstrous nature of the plan. The words that confirmed this was never about gold digging, but about something far more sinister. "Honestly," Caryn said, her voice a flat, emotionless whisper, "once it's all legally mine, the stress of him will probably finish him off. It's a win-win." A win-win. The headphones fell from Amy's ears, clattering onto the table. The room spun. She scrambled from her chair and stumbled to the bathroom, where she was violently, physically sick. The 2 words echoed in her mind, a death knell for the man she had spent 30 years of her life with. A win-win. Caryn wasn't just hoping to inherit the farm. She was viewing Matt's death as the final, convenient, and profitable step in her master plan. His demise wasn't an unfortunate possibility. It was the desired outcome, the second win in her victory. The stress of him. She wasn't planning to alleviate his stress. She was counting on it. She was counting on his own body to do the dirty work for her once she had secured the prize. This wasn't just a recording of a cruel comment. This was, in Amy's mind, a confession of malicious intent, of a depraved indifference to human life. She sat on her kitchen floor for over an hour, the cold tile doing nothing to stop the shaking that racked her entire body. The happy photos of her grandchildren that cycled across the digital frame's screen on her laptop now seemed like a grotesque mockery. She had set a trap to catch a thief, but she had instead captured a monster. The question of what to do next was monumental. Confronting Caryn was pointless. She would deny everything. Going to Matt with this would be a catastrophe. The shock alone could be devastating to his already fragile health. He might not even believe it, choosing to believe Caryn's inevitable lies over the evidence of his own ears. The police? What could they do? It was a recording of a private conversation, a statement of intent perhaps, but likely not enough for any legal action. No, there was only one path forward. There was only one way to break through the wall Caryn had built around Matt. She had to fight fire with fire. She had to use the one thing Matt might still listen to, the one thing that could possibly cut through his delusion, the love for his sons. Amy transferred the single, damning audio file, the win-win file, to a secure USB drive. She labeled it simply, "Listen to this." Her initial fear had transformed into a cold, hard resolve. This was no longer just about protecting Matt. It was about saving him. She picked up her phone, her fingers steady now. She didn't call Matt, she didn't call a lawyer, she called Zach. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth, replaced by an icy gravity. "You, me, and Jeremy. As soon as possible. It's about your father, and it's an emergency." The reckoning was coming. Amy Roloff, armed with an invisible weapon, was about to bring the war for Roloff Farms directly to her children's door, and together they would be forced to confront the woman who was not just trying to steal their legacy, but was calmly and coldly waiting for their father to die. The fallout would be biblical, the confrontation explosive, and the family would never, ever be the same again. And in our next installment, we will detail the moment Zach and Jeremy hear the tape and the furious, heartbreaking confrontation that followed when they played it for their father, forcing him to listen to the woman he loves discussing his death as her ultimate victory. The call from Amy came in late in the afternoon, and it cut through Zach Roloff's day with an unsettling urgency. There was no preamble, no small talk. Her voice was flat, tight, and held a chilling seriousness that he had not heard in years, not even during the most heated days of the divorce. She needed him and Jeremy to meet her at her house that evening. She insisted it was not open for discussion and that they were not to mention it to their father or to Caryn. When Zach tried to ask what it was about, assuming it was yet another grievance over the ongoing farm negotiations, Amy cut him off. "This isn't about the sale, Zach," she said, and the tremor in her voice sent a jolt of alarm through him. "This is about your dad. Bring Jeremy. Don't be late." That evening, the two brothers arrived at their mother's house within minutes of each other. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. They found Amy in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her laptop open, but the screen was dark. She looked as if she hadn't slept in days. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes holding a deep, haunted look that startled them both. She didn't offer them drinks or ask how they were. She simply gestured to the two chairs opposite her. They sat down, exchanging a wary glance. This was something different. This was not the usual family drama. This was a gathering of solemn purpose, and they were beginning to feel a creeping dread. "Before I show you why I called you here," Amy began, her voice low and steady, "I need you to understand something. I need you to forget for a moment that I am your mother and that I am Matt's ex-wife. I need you to forget every argument we've ever had about the farm, about Caryn, about anything. You need to listen to this not as my son's, but as his." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Jeremy shifted uncomfortably in his chair, ready to be defensive, while Zach just watched her, his expression unreadable but intense. "For months," Amy continued, "I've had a bad feeling. A feeling that what was happening with your dad and Caryn was more than just a new relationship. I saw him changing, getting weaker, more dependent. I saw her taking control of everything, his schedule, his health, his finances. I tried to warn him, and he wouldn't listen. I tried to talk to you both, and you thought it was just bitterness on my part. I don't blame you for that. From the outside, that's what it looked like. But I knew it was something else, something dangerous." She took a shaky breath and opened her laptop. "I was desperate," she confessed, her eyes not meeting theirs, instead fixed on the screen. "I did something that I'm not proud of, something that was a complete violation of privacy. But I swear to you both, I did it because I believed your father's well-being, maybe even his life, was at stake." She looked up then, and the raw fear in her eyes finally silenced any lingering skepticism in the room. Zach leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Jeremy's arms were crossed tightly over his chest, but his gaze was locked on the laptop. "I gave your father a gift," Amy said, "a digital photo frame for his office. and inside it there was a recording device. A sharp intake of breath came from Jeremy. Zach's eyes widened, a flicker of shock and anger in them. This was beyond anything they could have imagined. It was recorded for weeks, Amy said, ignoring their reactions. It recorded everything that was said in that office when Caryn thought she was alone. I heard her complaining about him, mocking him. I heard her talking about consolidating his finances into trusts that he barely understood. It was all bad. But that's not why I called you here. There's one recording, one conversation, and it's the reason we are all sitting at this table right now. Her hands were trembling as she navigated with the trackpad. She found the audio file labeled, "Listen to this." "I want you to listen carefully to every single word," she whispered, "and then you will understand." She clicked the play button. The first sound was a faint rustle of papers, then the unmistakable, cheerful voice of Caryn Chandler filled the room. The brothers flinched, the sound of her voice in this context feeling like a violation. She was talking to her friend, Brenda. The audio quality was terrifyingly clear. They heard Caryn boasting, her voice laced with triumph. "It's done," she said. "He signed the last of the trust directives this afternoon. Everything is in place. My lawyer said it's ironclad. The farm is secure." Zach and Jeremy exchanged a dark look. This confirmed their worst suspicions about the business side of things. Caryn had manipulated their father into signing over the farm's future. The anger was palpable. But then they heard the faint voice of Brenda asking a question they couldn't quite make out. And Caryn's response came, chilling them to the bone. "What happens next? You mean with him?" Caryn asked. There was that long, terrible pause that Amy had experienced, a silence that felt heavy with malice. And then came the words that would shatter their world, the words that would echo in their minds for the rest of their lives. "Honestly," Caryn's voice said, a cold, flat whisper that was devoid of any emotion. "Once it's all legally mine, the stress of him will probably finish him off. It's a win-win." The recording ended. The only sound in the kitchen was the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Jeremy was ashen, his mouth slightly agape, staring at the laptop as if it were a venomous snake. Zach had pushed his chair back from the table, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. He looked from the laptop to his mother, whose face was now streaked with silent tears. She hadn't been exaggerating. This wasn't about jealousy. This was about something monstrous. For a full minute, no one spoke. The ugly truth of those two words, win-win, hung in the air, poisoning the room. It recontextualized everything. Every act of kindness from Caryn, every moment of her supposed caregiving, every decision made in the name of reducing Matt's stress, was now revealed to be a step in a cold, calculated plot. She wasn't just waiting for Matt to die. She was actively counting on it as the final piece of her puzzle. His death was her second victory. The stress that she was cultivating, the isolation she was enforcing, it wasn't a side effect of her control. It was the intended mechanism of his demise. Jeremy was the first to speak, his voice a choked whisper. "Is that real?" he asked, looking at his mother. "It has to be fake. Amy, where did you get this?" "It's real, Jeremy," Amy said, her voice breaking. "I pulled it from the device myself. That is her voice. That is her plan. She wants your father gone." Zach slammed his hand down on the table, the sharp crack making both of them jump. "That witch," he seethed, the word inadequate for the rage that was consuming him. He stood up and began pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. All this time, we've been fighting about acres and price points. We've been acting like it's a business deal. And she's been playing a completely different game." He stopped and looked at his mother. "She's trying to kill him. Slowly, maybe, but she is trying to kill him." The three of them sat in the wreckage of this new reality. The hours that followed were a blur of rage, grief, and panicked strategizing. Jeremy, even the more skeptical one, made Amy play the recording again and again. He listened for edits, for any sign of digital manipulation, but there was none. The chilling, casual cruelty in Caryn's voice was undeniably authentic. With each listening, his denial crumbled further, replaced by a profound sickness. He thought back to every time he'd seen his dad looking tired, every time Caryn had said, "Matt's not feeling up to visitors today." He remembered the arguments where Caryn had played the peacemaker, telling the boys not to upset their father, not to put him under any undue stress. It had all been a performance. She wasn't protecting him from them. She was isolating her asset, managing her investment until it paid out. Zach's fury was a different beast. It was focused and it demanded action. "I'm going over there right now," he declared, heading for the door. "I'm going to drag her out of that house by her hair, and I'm going to play this on a loudspeaker for the whole world to hear." "No!" Amy shouted, grabbing his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Zach, stop and think. That's what she would want. You go over there screaming she plays the victim. She'll tell your dad you're attacking her, that you're trying to drive a wedge between them. She will twist it, she will lie, and your father, in his state, he'll believe her over you. He'll believe her over the evidence of his own ears. You cannot confront her. You have to confront him." Her words stopped Zach in his tracks. He knew she was right. Caryn's power was not in her own strength, but in her control over Matt. A direct assault on her would be deflected by the wall of delusion she had so carefully constructed around him. They couldn't attack the puppeteer. They had to show the puppet his own strings. The conversation then shifted from what to how. How do you present evidence like this to a man whose health is already precarious? How do you tell your father that the woman he loves, the woman he has entrusted with his life and his legacy, views his death as a convenient bonus? The shock alone could be dangerous. They debated for what felt like an eternity. Should Amy be there? They decided against it. Her presence would immediately put Matt on the defensive, allowing him to frame it as an ex-wife's revenge. This had to come from his sons. It had to be an act of love, however brutal. They devised a plan, one that felt like a covert operation. They couldn't do it at the main farmhouse. That was Caryn's territory. She would find a way to interrupt, to spin, to control the situation. They needed to get Matt on neutral ground alone. Zach would be the one to make the call. He would tell his father there was a serious, urgent issue with the irrigation pump on his own property, the one that watered his north fields. It was a complex piece of machinery that Matt knew better than anyone. He would say the technician was quoting an insane price and he needed his dad's expert opinion before he got fleeced. It was a perfect lure. It played to Matt's ego, his desire to still be the expert, the one his sons needed. And most importantly, it was a problem that Caryn would have absolutely no interest in. The next day, the air was thick with a silent, terrible anticipation. Amy had copied the audio file onto a small, unmarked USB drive, which she gave to Zach. It felt as heavy as a loaded gun in his pocket. He made the call to his father late in the morning. Just as they predicted, Caryn answered. "Roloff residence," her voice chirped, a sound that now made Zach's skin crawl. He asked for his dad, his voice strained but steady. When Matt got on the line, Zach laid out the fabricated story about the irrigation pump. "I'm really in a bind here, Dad. Can you come take a look? I'm at home." Matt, just as they'd hoped, took the bait. "Yeah, of course, son. Let me just get my boots on. I'll be over in 20 minutes. They could hear Caryn in the background. "Don't overdo it, honey. Let Zach handle the heavy stuff." The casual, caring tone of her voice was a dagger in Zach's ear. He hung up the phone, his heart pounding. The final phase of their desperate plan was in motion. Jeremy was already waiting at Zach's house. Neither of them had told their wives the full, horrific details, only that there was a grave family emergency they had to handle concerning their father. The house was quiet. Tori had taken the kids out for the afternoon to give them space. The brothers paced the living room, the silence between them charged with a mixture of grief and adrenaline. They had placed a single chair in the middle of the room, facing the television, where they would play the audio through the sound system. There would be no escape from it. When they saw Matt's mule pull up the long driveway, they both took a deep, steadying breath. This was it, the point of no return. They would either save their father or break him completely. Matt came in through the back door, looking slightly annoyed but ready to help. "All right, so what's the deal with this pump? Is it the main bearing again?" he asked, looking past his sons toward the fields. Zach blocked his path. "Dad, the pump is fine," he said, his voice heavy. "We need to talk. We need you to sit down." Matt's face clouded over instantly. The change was immediate. He went from a helpful father to defensive patriarch. "Oh, I see what this is," he snapped, his voice rising. "You tricked me. You got me over here for another ambush about the farm. I can't believe you two. After everything, you're still pulling these games." "This is not about the farm," Jeremy cut in, his voice louder and sharper than he intended. "This is about you. This is about Caryn." "Don't you dare bring Caryn into this," Matt warned, pointing a finger at him. "She has been my rock through all of this drama you two have created. She's the only one who has my back." The irony of that statement was so profound it felt like a physical blow. Zach felt a wave of pity for his father, a man so thoroughly and completely deceived. "Dad, please," Zach said, his voice softening, pleading. "We would not have done this. We would not have lied to you if this wasn't the most important thing you will ever hear. 5 minutes. Just sit down and listen. For us, please." There was something in Zach's desperate tone that finally broke through Matt's wall of anger. He saw the genuine anguish on his sons' faces. This wasn't a business tactic. This was something else. With a heavy, resentful sigh, he walked over and slumped into the chair they had positioned for him. "Fine. 5 minutes. Then I'm leaving." Zach nodded, his hand shaking as he pulled the USB drive from his pocket. He walked over to the television and plugged it in. The screen flickered to a simple media player interface. He used the remote to select the single audio file. He took one last look at his father, whose arms were crossed, his expression a mixture of defiance and curiosity. Then he looked at Jeremy, who gave him a grim, almost imperceptible nod. Zach pressed play. Caryn's voice filled the living room, amplified by the surround sound speakers. "It's done. He signed the last of the trust directives this afternoon." Matt's expression began to change instantly. His defiance wavered, replaced by confusion. He recognized her voice, of course, and the triumphant tone. He glanced at Zach, a question in his eyes. "What is this? Where did you get this?" Zach just stood there, his face like stone, and stared back at his father. Matt's attention snapped back to the speakers as he heard the disembodied voice of Brenda ask her muffled question. And then it came. The pause. In the dead quiet of Zach's living room, the silence stretched, a vacuum of impending doom. Matt leaned forward slightly, his brow furrowed, straining to hear. "Honestly," Caryn's voice whispered from all around him, an intimate, venomous secret shared with the whole room. "Once it's all legally mine, the stress of him will probably finish him off. It's a win-win." The sound cut off. Silence descended again, but this time it was different. It was a hollow, dead silence. The sound of a life imploding. Matt did not move. He did not breathe. He sat frozen in the chair, staring at the blank television screen as if he could see the ghost of the woman who had just pronounced his death sentence. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, grayish pallor. His jaw was slack. His eyes, which a moment ago had been filled with anger, now held a look of such profound, devastating shock that it was hard to look at. For a moment, Zach feared his father was having a heart attack. "Dad," he said softly. Matt didn't respond. He seemed to be in another world, a world where the last few years of his life were replaying in his mind. But this time, the film was a horror movie. Every memory, every touch, every word of concern from Caryn was now drenched in the poison of those final words. The stress of him will probably finish him off. A win-win. Finally, a low guttural sound escaped Matt's throat, a noise of pure animal pain. He slowly raised a shaking hand to his face. "No," he whispered to the television screen. "No, that's not her." He turned his head to look at his sons, his eyes wide with a desperate, pleading denial. "You faked this. This is one of Amy's tricks. You paid someone. It's fake." His voice cracked, rising in pitch with each word of denial. "Dad," Jeremy said, his own voice thick with emotion as he knelt by his father's chair. "Listen to it again. You know her voice. You know that's her." "Play it again," Matt choked out, a tear finally breaking free and tracing a path down his ashen cheek. "Play the damn thing again." Zach's heart broke for his father. With a heavy heart, he picked up the remote and pressed play once more. The entire terrible sequence played out again. The triumphant declaration of financial control, the chilling pause, and the cold-blooded, whispered confession. This time, there was no defiance in Matt's posture. He just absorbed it. He listened to the woman he loved, the woman he was planning to spend the rest of his life with, the woman he had given everything to, as she calmly discussed his death as the final, convenient closing of a business deal. When it finished for the second time, Matt sagged in the chair, the fight completely gone out of him. The denial was gone, replaced by a truth so hideous it had broken something deep inside him. He didn't cry out. He didn't rage. A quiet, terrible sob escaped him, and then another. He covered his face with his hands, and his whole body shook with a grief that was terrifying to witness. He was not just mourning the end of a relationship. He was mourning the life he thought he had. He was mourning his own judgment, his own trust, his own naivety. He had welcomed his own executioner into his home, into his bed, into his heart, and she laughed about it. Zach and Jeremy stood by helpless. There were no words of comfort that could possibly touch this kind of pain. They had done what they had to do. They had ripped away the beautiful lie to show him the ugly truth, and now they had to watch him bleed. After several long minutes, Matt slowly lowered his hands. His face was a wreck of grief and betrayal. His eyes were empty. "Leave it," he said, his voice a hoarse, broken rasp. He pointed a trembling finger at the USB drive still plugged into the television. "Leave that here with me." He slowly, unsteadily, got to his feet. He looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. He wouldn't look at his sons. He couldn't. He shuffled toward the door like a very old man. "Dad, what are you going to do?" Zach asked, his voice full of concern. Matt paused at the door, his back still to them. "I don't know," he said, his voice barely audible. "I need to think." And with that, he walked out of the house, got into his mule, and drove away, leaving his son standing in the wreckage of his shattered world. He was driving back to the farm, back to the house he shared with a woman who was waiting for him to die. And no one, not his sons, not Amy, and least of all Matt himself, had any idea what would happen when he finally came face to face with his own smiling predator. The reckoning had just begun. The short drive from Zach's house back to the main farmhouse was a funeral procession for the life Matt Roloff thought he had. Every familiar landmark, the old barn, the wedding bridge, the pumpkin patch, was now a tombstone marking another lie. The man who had driven away from his sons was not the same man who returned. The grief was still there, a cold, heavy stone in his gut, but it was now calcifying into something else. Something hard, sharp, and cold. A profound and chilling rage had taken root, not the hot, explosive anger he was known for, but a quiet, methodical fury. He had been played for a fool, his love and trust used as weapons against him. He had been treated not as a partner, but as an obstacle, an asset to be managed, and a problem to be solved through his own death. The woman waiting for him back at the house wasn't his loving caregiver. She was a saboteur, patiently waiting for the engine of his life to finally seize up from the stress she was so carefully curating. Sources close to the family described Matt's demeanor as he walked into the house as unnervingly calm. Caryn was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she scrolled through something on her phone. She looked up and smiled, the same warm, practiced smile she gave the cameras, the same smile that he now saw as the predatory baring of teeth. "Hey, honey, you're back soon. Did you get Zach's pump figured out? I hope the boys didn't stress you out too much." The casual, condescending concern in her voice was like gasoline on the fire, now burning in Matt's soul. He didn't answer her question. He simply looked at her, his expression completely flat, and said, "Caryn, come into the office. We need to talk about the trust." Her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. The trusts were her domain, a topic Matt usually avoided, claiming it gave him a headache. But she recovered quickly, her confidence unwavering. She was the one in control, after all. "Of course, sweetie," she said, patting his arm as she walked past him. "If there's something you're worried about, we can go over it. I've got all the paperwork right here." She walked into the office, the very room where she had laughed about his dependence, the very room where she had confessed her death wish for him. She was walking into the epicenter of her own betrayal, completely unaware that the trap she had so carefully set for him was about to spring shut on her instead. Matt followed her in and closed the door behind them. He didn't sit at his desk. He leaned against it, crossing his arms, creating a physical barrier between them. Caryn sat in the plush client chair opposite the desk, pulling a folder from a filing cabinet. "Okay," she said brightly, all business. "What's on your mind? Did one of the boys say something to upset you about the estate?" Matt let her talk, watching her with those new, dead eyes. He let her explain for the last time how the new trust structure protected him, how it simplified everything, how it took the burden off his shoulders. He listened to the smooth, practiced lies, the performance she had perfected over years. Every word was a twist of the knife. When she finally finished her reassuring speech, a proud, self-satisfied smile on her face, Matt didn't respond. He just stared at her. The silence stretched. Her smile began to fade, replaced by a look of uncertainty. "Matt, what is it? You're scaring me a little." "You're right to be scared," Matt said, his voice quiet, but carrying a weight she had never heard before. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small, black USB drive. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger. "Do you know what this is, Caryn?" She stared at the drive, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "No. What is it?" "It's the truth," he said. He walked around the desk, his movements slow and deliberate. He plugged the drive into his computer. Caryn watched him, a knot of genuine fear now tightening in her stomach. This was not the weak, pliable Matt she managed. This was someone else. Matt clicked the file open. He turned the speakers up loud. And he pressed play. Her own voice, triumphant and clear, filled the small office. "It's done! He signed the last of the trust directives this afternoon." Caryn's face went white. Her eyes darted from the computer speakers to Matt's stony face. She recognized her own voice, her own words, but couldn't process how they were coming from his computer. A frantic denial was already forming on her lips. It was a deep fake, a recording Amy had spliced together. It was a trick. It had to be a trick. Then came the muffled voice of her friend and the long, damning pause. She knew what was coming next. A wave of pure, cold panic washed over her. She opened her mouth to scream, to stop it, to say anything, but it was too late. Her own whispered confession slithered out of the speakers and coiled itself in the dead air between them. Honestly, once it's all legally mine, the stress of him will probably finish him off. It's a win-win. The audio ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Caryn sat frozen in the chair, her face a mask of horror. The blood had drained from it, leaving her looking pale and gaunt under the office lights. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The game was over. The lie was exposed. There was no explanation, no escape. That's not, she finally stammered, her voice a reedy, pathetic version of its usual confident tone. That's not me, it's edited. Matt, you have to believe me. This is Amy. She's trying to destroy us. She faked this. Matt let her frantic denials hang in the air for a moment. Then he took a single, deliberate step towards her. He leaned down, placing his hands on the arms of her chair, trapping her. He looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time, she saw no love, no affection, no weakness. She saw only a vast, empty expanse of contempt. The only person who tried to destroy us, Caryn, was you, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. You just didn't finish the job. You sat in this room in my house and you talked about my death like it was the final payment on a new car. You smiled to my face while you waited for my heart to give out. You cashed the checks while you dug the grave. Tears were streaming down her face now, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of panic, the tears of a cornered animal. No, Matt, please, I love you. I didn't mean it. It was just a stupid thing I said to a friend. It was a joke. Please. Was it a joke when you had me sign those papers? He asked, his voice never rising, which made it all the more terrifying. Was it a joke when you told me it was to reduce my stress? You weren't reducing my stress, Caryn. You were banking on it. You were investing in it. He stood up straight, his face hard as granite. He was no longer the patient. He was the patriarch. He was no longer the victim. He was the judge. He pointed a single trembling finger toward the door. The verdict was in. Get your things, he said, the two words landing like hammer blows. I want you to pack a bag with whatever you need for tonight. The rest of it, I will have sent to you. I want you out of this house in 1 hour. Matt, no! We can talk about this, she pleaded, scrambling out of the chair. Don't throw away everything we have. We have nothing, he roared, his voice finally breaking with the full force of his pain and rage. It was the roar of a wounded lion, and it made her physically recoil. Everything we had was a lie. Your lie. You don't live here anymore. You don't work here anymore. You are not a part of my life anymore. Now get out of my sight before I do something we'll both regret. The finality in his voice was absolute. Caryn stared at him for a moment longer, searching his face for any sliver of the man she had so easily controlled, but he was gone. Defeated, she turned and stumbled out of the office, her sobs echoing down the hallway. Matt stood there, listening to her footsteps go up the stairs, his entire body trembling with the adrenaline of the confrontation. Then, a wave of exhaustion and grief hit him so hard his knees buckled. He sank into his own chair, put his head in his hands, and finally, for the first time, he wept. He wept for his own foolishness, for the years he had wasted, for the love he thought was real. He wept for the fact that his ex-wife, the woman he had pushed away, had been the one to save his life. An hour later, as the sun began to set over the farm, Matt watched from the office window as Caryn Chandler loaded a single suitcase into her car. She didn't look back at the house. She got in, started the engine, and drove down the long gravel driveway, out of his life forever. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of damage control. Matt made 2 phone calls. The first was to his lawyer, initiating the long, arduous, and incredibly expensive legal battle to untangle the web of trusts and powers of attorney he had so trustingly signed, a battle to reclaim his own farm from the legal fortress Caryn had built around it. The second call was to Zach. It's done, he said, his voice hoarse and broken. She's gone. A quiet wave of relief and sorrow passed between father and son. The war was over, but the casualties were immense. Reports from our sources say the family is now in a state of quiet, fragile rebuilding. The rift between Matt and his sons has not magically healed, but the foundation for a new, more honest relationship has been laid, cemented by a shared trauma. Amy Roloff has not issued a statement, and according to a friend, she feels no sense of victory, only a profound sadness for the entire family. She did what a mother had to do, and the consequences, while necessary, have been devastating for everyone. The future of Roloff Farms is once again uncertain, now tied up in legal battles that could take years to resolve. Matt Roloff is a changed man, more isolated, more cautious, and forced to confront his own mortality, not from a health scare, but from an act of profound human betrayal. The Amy tapes, as they've come to be known, were never leaked. They remain a dark family secret, a testament to how close the Roloff dynasty came to ending, not with a business dispute, but with a quiet, lonely death. This story is still developing, and we will continue to follow the legal fallout and the family's attempts to heal from this unthinkable deception. Make sure you are subscribed to LPBW Update for the very latest. The cameras may have stopped rolling on this chapter, but the real story, as always, is just beginning.